This is OFN NFL Preview on the Our Football Network as we talk NFC South football with Mark Lawrence at Playbook.com. Mark, how's it going this week?
I'm doing just terrific. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. And I want to remind everybody, they can see here the Playbook magazine available at bookstores right now, like Books A Million and Barnes & Nobles. You can order Playbook magazine. That's Mark Lawrence's going on 29th year or 28th year?
This is issue number 28 this year.
28 years. You can log on to playbook.com and order this Playbook NFL and also college football magazine. See, this is what's really great about this magazine. It's not just the NFL or just college football. You have both the NFL and college football.
Yeah, it's a two for one, two for your money type of a magazine. And the other nice thing about it, Greg, is it serves a purpose all season long because we look at games game by game by game. We analyze the NFL season by the quarters, the first 4 games, the next 4 games, so forth and whatnot. So we break the season down on a weekly basis. So it's a nice go-to refer book all throughout the year.
And of course, we're going to be on the air all through the year. So we're going to be able to reference the guide. And look, we could talk about certain things from the guide and give anybody who watches these shows a little bit of free advice and free information. But there's so much information in those in that publication alone, just for this 1 year, that it don't matter. I mean, we can throw out some free tidbits every week, and that's okay because you got thousands of stats and trends and all sorts of things that we're never going to get to on this show. That's for sure.
Well, no doubt about it. That's what it's all about. It's just a jam-packed full of information. And I think there's a reason it's the #1 best-selling football preview guide in Las Vegas, and it has been for a long while because it has what everybody's looking for.
All right, now NFC South talk today, and what we're going to do is, as we have now for the 5th week, we still have 3 more divisions to go. And that is go in order of the teams, odds-wise, to win the division, Super Bowl championship. So we're going to go New Orleans first, and Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Carolina. Now, New Orleans and Tampa Bay are very close as far as the odds are concerned, which means that on any given sports book, you might be able to get Tampa Bay the favorite, New Orleans the favorite. If you look at it on the sports book that I use, New Orleans is an even money pick to win the division. Tampa Bay is plus 140, but they're both 5-1 to win the championship of the NFC, and they're both 10-1 to win the Super Bowl, whereas Atlanta is 7-1 to win the division. Carolina is 20-1 to win the division. Boy, things changed that quickly. Atlanta 22 and 35 respectively, and Carolina 66 and 125 respectively for the championship and the Super Bowl. And that's, again, the order we're going to go into, starting with New Orleans. But it is funny how within just a couple of years or even a year, how Carolina and Atlanta could be such heavy underdogs. And there's still some talent in those teams. So I don't know. You never know. That's so great about the NFL. Just because you're supposed to finish 3rd or 4th doesn't mean you're going to.
Well, there's 2 common denominators for the reasons the other 2 teams aren't in the picture or expected to be, and it's because New Orleans and Tampa have Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and very, very popular not only with the public but also at the betting windows because both quarterbacks know how to cash tickets. So when Tom Brady went from New England to Tampa Bay, he just blew up all the odds. And then when they signed Gronkowski, it just sort of cemented that, and that's why they are creeping in as the favorite as we're speaking in this particular division. But it's still Drew Brees' division until someone else says so.
Was that John the drummer boy that I just hear, or was that a lightning strike?
No, that is thunder and lightning. We're down here in South Florida, and we're having a good storm right now as we're speaking.
All right, so just in case they see your window popping back and forth and small and large, we're blaming the weather down in South Florida for that. Okay, now I spoke with Ross Jackson, who has the Saints podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network covering the Saints. They do it every day. Ross does a great job talking New Orleans Saints football. Also has the coverage for the Saints on their SB Nation page. And so that's available already on demand on the Our Lads Football Network website page, as well as on our YouTube channel. But anyway, let's talk New Orleans because they're the slight favorite right now. And I don't know whether or not what happened this offseason with Drew Brees is going to have a problem with the team. I think the only way we'll notice that is if somehow they get off to a slow start. Like, and let's just say I don't know what their schedule is like. I haven't looked at it yet. But let's just say they lose their first game or something, or they go 1-2 in their first 3. You know how it is when everything's going great, everything's going great. When start losing games, then that's when you really find out about the team. So maybe that's the only way we really find out whether or not there's any animosity left over from what happened with Drew Brees. I don't know. It's a guess, but the key with deciding that you're going to pick the Saints, at least as a Super Bowl championship team, is whether or not you believe that Drew Brees is going to get over the hump. Yes, he's got a Super Bowl ring, but in the last few years, they just have not been able to get over the hump in postseason play.
Well, what they've done in the last 3 years, Greg, is win more games than any team in the National Football League. They have 39 wins the last 3 years, and nobody has that number. And that's all largely due to Drew Brees and obviously Michael Thomas and the great success that they've met with here in the past. So the question now becomes, will a 41-year-old Drew Brees drop off as much as Tom Brady did last football season as a 43-year-old quarterback? I don't believe he will. I believe he's still really physically fit, and he really wants to play. Now, I think he also will win over the players on his team. He's not a troublemaker by any means at all. No. I mean, he's basically a philanthropist in the city of New Orleans for all the great things that he's done for that city. And
he didn't have to apologize. So and nobody in that community would have thought any different of Drew Brees if he didn't apologize. That's how glorified he is in that town, in that city.
And rightfully so. I mean, like you mentioned, a Super Bowl ring. He's taken him to the promised land. Admirable person, both on and off the field, and everything that an owner would want in a quarterback. So I can see this team really trying to rally behind him because they made some good off-season acquisitions to try for one more push, if you will, for Drew Brees and the players that they brought in. So I think this is what makes them the team to beat, and rightfully so. If for no other reason, those 39 wins, that says it all. It's a football team that knows how to win football games.
Yeah, the key acquisition on defense just happened about a week ago, within the last week, and that was Nigel Bradham. They really needed some help up the middle of the defense at linebacker. Now, he's had his share of injury issues, so they got to keep him healthy. And don't forget, Saints had some injury issues as well last year, which was part of the problem when they weren't able to beat Minnesota in the playoff game. But the biggest pickup was on offense, Emmanuel Sanders. Now, Emmanuel Sanders is going to give Drew Brees the most competent number 2 receiver that he's had since Brandon Cooks in 2016. But in saying that, Sanders is 32, 33. So he has to stay healthy. And the difference between winning a division title and a Super Bowl are definitely 2 different animals. I would feel a lot more comfortable picking the Saints to win the division, knowing it's even money, than, to tell you the truth, taking a risk. 5-1 to get to the Super Bowl is way too small. If I'm taking the Saints to get to the Super Bowl, I'm taking the Saints to win the Super Bowl.
I don't disagree with you. In fact, it's my feeling they are the team to beat in the NFC. You mentioned Malcolm Jenkins, and he'll be a great addition to the team. The hurdle he'll have to get over is he's been to 3 different Super Bowls with 3 different teams. And to do that, he would be the only player to do it with 4 different teams.
Malcolm Jenkins?
Doesn't mean that he can't.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. Emmanuel Sanders, the wide receiver. Okay. Yeah. So to do just that, he'll have to do something nobody else has done. That doesn't mean he's not capable. Okay. And there are numbers, and he's only one of 7 players to do that, to play in 3 different Super Bowls with 3 different teams. So, but that's a big boost. As you mentioned, Michael Thomas and him is a strong 1-2 punch. Not to mention a strong running game for this football team here as well. And, you shudder to think if anything were to happen to Drew Brees, all they would have for a backup is a quarterback who led the league in passing last year to step in
Yeah.
behind him.
Well, that would be
that would
interesting
obviously.
if they decided, well, what would be the decision? Because there's still a lot of people who believe that Taysom Hill it could very well be next in line to be the starting quarterback, and he'd be given a shot. So that would be interesting. Now, he may only last a half, but Taysom Hill might be the guy that gets the first crack. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the faith that Sean Payton would have in Jameis Winston, because it was interesting. Ross made a great point. If Brees stays healthy the entire year without any preseason games and without any games for Jameis Winston to play in this year, how does that affect him as a free agent going forward? Probably in a positive way for Peyton, because nobody's going to give Winston a big deal in 2021 based on what he did last year. And if Brees retires after this year, then he may be a cheap free agent addition, a re-addition for the Saints, almost like a let's prove it contract. And then Sean Payton, who gets to see him and practice every day, believes, yeah, I think he is the guy to lead this offense after Drew Brees. So that would be interesting as well. But if he does wind up playing, still, you can be a lot worse than Jameis Winston as your number two.
Unquestionably. He's got an arm. He had 30 picks last year. That's never any good.
Yeah.
But but he does have the physical skills. And I also think if it were to happen, my vote would be he would go to Jameis Winston and keep Taysom Hill in the same role that he's been beneficial in. Exactly. Because if Brees goes down and you insert Hill, you've got two players in two different positions now. And so you're making more adaptation if you want. I think he'll keep it as simple as he possibly can.
All right. And by the way, what has really been killing the Saints more than anything, yes, Brees has not been his best. I think 3 touchdowns, 2 picks in his last 3 playoff games, 2 of them losses. But what has really hurt the Saints in these playoff games that they've lost has been, or just in general, Alvin Kamara.
True.
Alvin Kamara in 5 career playoff games averages 3.3 rushing yards attempt, and he doesn't have, I believe, a rushing touchdown, and he hasn't gained over 200 yards rushing in 5 playoff games. That has got to improve in the playoffs if they're going to be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, it does. And, I don't think Sean Payton's losing sleep over that right now, because he knows that the team is not all about Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara, well, obviously, the law of averages says Alvin Kamara is going to have a good postseason sooner or later. He's just too good of an athlete not to.
Yeah,
so
you would think so.
Right. So however they change the game plan up, I would look for him to be effective in the postseason this year.
And the defense, they've got to stay healthier. They were banged up last year. That means Marcus Davenport has got to stay healthy. He's got to give him a really big-time edge presence opposite Cameron Jordan. That's what's been missing on the team. We mentioned how big of a pickup Bradham is at linebacker. Zach Bond was drafted in the 3rd round. He's going to help, hopefully, as far as an edge rusher. And then we mentioned Malcolm Jenkins, who replaces Von Bell, basically, in the secondary. And Janoris Jenkins is there for the full year. And Eli Apple's gone, which is a good thing.
Well, a good thing talent-wise, but when you've got Jenkins and Jenkins together in a secondary, I can only see turmoil in a football team.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So it depends upon how they can weather through that particular storm. I think Malcolm Jenkins might end up being more of a problem to the team than Drew Brees, largely because of his role in the National Football League these days. But there's still 2 very talented players, and Malcolm Jenkins is indeed coming home, where he played for the Saints from 2009 to 2013.
Yeah, and again, that's the relationship right there that we were talking about. If things were to get a little ugly early, Jenkins on one side and Drew Brees on the other, even if there's 80 or 90% in that locker room that still love Drew Brees, You only need a little bit of divisiveness that could end up just disrupting everything. And they don't want to go there. So, but look, if they're going to have a problem winning the division, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be the team you would think that would give them the most problems with Tom Brady now in town. They still have an excellent coach in Bruce Arians. They have the two top receiving duo in the NFL in Godwin and Evans. The offensive line is still the biggest problem because Brady must have time to throw. Winston is able to run around a little bit and buy time, even though I'm sure, look, 30 of those interceptions, a good number of them probably had to do with Jameis Winston throwing the ball where he shouldn't have because he thought that, hey, I'm going to just chuck it somewhere based on pressure. So that's the reason Tristan Wirfs was Tampa Bay's first-round draft pick. LaShawn McCoy was just signed for the Bucs, so we'll see exactly how that impacts them with Ronald Jones supposedly ready to take the next step. But defensively, does Tampa Bay have what it takes to be a serious division, potentially a team that could knock off the Saints for the division title, but also a Super Bowl contender?
You know, somebody ran this by me, and I got to verify this, that between Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and Shady McCoy, you add up their years of experience in the National Football League, and the tenure is longer than Tampa Bay has been in the NFL.
They're old.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So we're not talking about a lot of youth here with this football program right now. They're in a win-now situation, and their head coach, I admire him as much as I admire any coach in the National Football League, and he will get the best out of Tom Brady. Whatever Brady's got left, Bruce Arians will be able to bring that out of him. We outlined this in the Playbook magazine that if you take a look at Arians and what he's done either as an offensive coordinator or a head coach, in each of the last 11 years, his teams have ranked in the top 10 in passing attacks. And that's what Tom Brady's brought in here for, to do just that. So, you know, the buzz is there for a lot of the right reasons with Tom Brady being here. What I saw in Tom Brady last year was a quarterback that if the name on the back of his uniform wasn't Brady, I don't think he'd be a starting quarterback.
Yeah, probably not. Yep.
Right. So, you know, there's a lot of hype here that's going to have to be lived up to in that sense. But again, I think the biggest advantage Tampa will have going into this season with the roster they have is Bruce Arians.
You know, I'm excited about some of the talent they have in the secondary. I think that they have the talent to improve dramatically back there. They've got to keep Justin Evans healthy, but you know they have Dean, they have Davis, Edwards, and now Antoine Winfield. Of course, I'm a huge fan of what he did this past year in Minnesota. They've spent some. I mean, the last 3 drafts, they have really invested in that secondary. And I expect that, look, it's going to be up to Todd Bowles to fix that secondary and make sure that those players, scouting wise, that's another thing. But I think I think they did a good job bringing in some good talent there. Now it's up to Bowles. Shaquille Barrett was one of the steals of free agency, of course, last year. You put him with Devin White, who should be a lot better in year 2. And then you got some of the other old guys, and Dominican Sue and Jason Pierre-Paul, who need to do their job. So they've got the talent. I could see them, if the Saints were to stumble a little bit, I'm not sure that's going to happen because they're such a machine. And if Drew Brees stays upright, I just don't see Tampa Bay at the level of New Orleans right now. The fact that they're both even, I would take advantage of that by jumping on New Orleans. I just don't think Tampa Bay is where New Orleans is right now.
Well, the parallel that I would draw here, Greg, is that when Tom Brady commandeered his way to all the Super Bowl rings in New England, he did it in a very, very weak division. Now, the neighborhood's a little bit tougher here right now.
Right.
Very much tougher. So, you know, he's got that to overcome here. Also, look at their schedule, and you look at their schedule, and you see that they're going to play 6 games this year where they have fewer rest than their opponent will. That's not a good omen for teams that are long in the tooth, generally, to say so. So, again, a lot of things are going to have to go right for this team, and I think the key is going to be the month of October for this football team. And the reason I say that is the month that Tom Brady is at his very best in his NFL career, in the month of October. He's 60-14 in his career, 50-23 to the spread. And when he faces losing teams in the month of October, he is 24-1 straight up and
Wow.
22-3 to the spread. Those are some pretty powerful numbers. So if Brady can do in October what he's done in the past, he'll put this football team in position to be in the chase by the end of the
And
year.
by the way, unlike the Saints, if Tom Brady were to miss a week or two, I don't see how Tampa Bay wins any games. I mean, they just don't have capable backups. I mean, maybe they get lucky and win a game if the opponent is a bad football team with Blaine Gabbert as the backup. I can't imagine
No,
Ryan Griffin is going to end up number 2. So Gabbert's going to be the backup. But if you're out a month, your season might be over.
absolutely.
All right.
So, that's one of the reasons they fortified this offensive line. They know they have to keep him upright, Tom Brady, this football season here. And I did like the draft pick of Wirfs.
Yes.
I'm a big Cleveland Browns fan, as you know, and I was rather hoping the Browns were going to select him. They went with Willis instead from Alabama, who they felt was the better prospect. But I think there was a good selection by Tampa Bay when they did land Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah, and look, he could be that guy that instantly elevates the offensive line from an average to below average unit to an above average unit. And
Exactly.
I just can't believe the Bucks lucked themselves into potentially the best lineman in the draft possible. So, yeah.
Possible.
All right, Atlanta's next. And this is when we start talking about teams that could be really good sleepers. We talked about that last week with Cleveland. And I think this is another one of those spots with Atlanta. I don't know if I'm going to go there. And I think, and look, the biggest obstacle I have with this team is the decision again to just keep coming back or rehiring a guy like Dirk Cutter. I just don't get it. I think it's going to be Dan Quinn's undoing when he finally is let go. Everywhere Dirk Cutter goes, you can forget about the run game. It's always at the bottom of the league, and Matt Ryan needs a running game. I mean, Matt Ryan and this offense is not one of those offenses where, okay, especially now that he's getting older, it's not one of those offenses where I can throw the ball 40 times and we're going to be okay and win most of our games. He has to have balance in his offense. And there was no balance last year. Now, I did like the way that they improved as the season wore on. This is another team that has had to deal with a lot of injuries the last couple of years on defense. So I'm kind of, again, that's why the Dirk Cutter thing is my only obstacle, but that doesn't mean they can't make the postseason. I think what it does is it eliminates them from doing anything more than that. But I think, like Cleveland, I think they could be a sneaky team to keep an eye on for the division and, of course, the postseason.
I agree with you, especially if you look at what they did last year. They really, really fizzled. 1-7 their first 8 football games the first half of the season, and then they won 6 straight games in the second half of the year. That's what they're building on, is this momentum coming into this football season here. Then you take a look, they added Todd Gurley to the offense and Hayden Hurst as a tight end. That now makes this team the only team in the National Football League that will have a total of 10 first-round picks that are projected as starters.
Wow.
So that's a lot of talent. I mean, whether it's decaying or not remains to be seen, but first-round selections are first-round selections. Then you've got Matt Ryan, a quarterback who is putting up arguably some numbers every bit as good as Drew Brees in this division here, maybe not surrounded by as much talent. The biggest loss for this football team, I think, will be Austin Cooper, the tight end. I know they replaced him with Hayden Hurst, and that was a good fill-in. But if you break down what Matt Ryan did last year when Austin Cooper was in the lineup with Matt Ryan had a passer rating of 105.5 and a QBR of 68.8 with Hooper. Without Hooper, he dropped to 86.7 and 49.8. So Hooper meant out the world to Matt Ryan last football season here. So they're going to have to make that adjustment and make sure that Hayden Hurst can fit into this lineup.
Well, yeah, and those numbers can stay the same as long as Hurst proves that he's every bit as good as Hooper. And look, I was saying it for years after Tony Gonzalez retired. Like every year we get to the draft, and I'd be like, all right, Falcons got to take a tight end. Falcons got to take a tight end. Falcons got to take a tight end. How can you not take a tight end when it was so obvious during Matt Ryan's better years that he flourished with Tony Gonzalez with that tight end? And he just didn't have the same success without the tight end. Last year, as you said, much better because he finally had a tight end that started. Look, Hooper had his breakout year, but I still think there are limitations to Hooper's game. I think Hurst has more talent upside than Hooper, but he hasn't shown it yet. The hope is that he does. And they invested a second-round draft pick in him. So they have a lot of expectations that Hurst is going to be that guy. And if he can do for the Falcons what Hooper did, then that's going to be very important. The offensive line is also a big deal for Atlanta. They used their 2 first-round draft picks last year on the offensive linemen. They had some injuries there, but both kids are going to be in their second year. So if they can prove that they were worthy of those first-round picks, that is going to be a big boost to that offensive line, which is so important in making sure they protect Matt Ryan.
I think another aspect of this team is the situation and condition of Julio Jones and whether or not he has anything left in the tank. The good news for Atlanta is that I was surprised to read this, that Calvin Ridley, the other wide receiver, he's ranked number 1 by the NFL Next Gen Stats as the league's top-rated receiver.
Okay.
Nice little 1-2 combo if Julio Jones is on his game. That makes Matt Ryan that much more dangerous. So in all, I agree with you. I think this is the real sleeper team in the division. And I might go so far as to say that if either New Orleans or Tampa does not play to the level of expectation this year, and I don't believe both of them will, one of them probably, but both of them I doubt it, I think Atlanta slips in and finishes in second place in this division.
Yeah, the one thing I'm a little bit concerned with is if anything happens, like say Julio Jones goes down for some time, they're not very deep at wide receiver. So that would be a big drop off. We don't know if Todd Gurley has anything left in the tank regarding his injury. If he's just last year's Todd Gurley and you compile that with Dirk Cutter and how bad he is as a coordinator for the run game, then they don't get anything out of that department. The defense, though, is where Atlanta has got to improve dramatically like they did second half of last season, because that's how that, as sexy as it is with the offense and as good as Matt Ryan was when they almost won that Super Bowl, equally effective defensively. They had a very strong defense, attacking defense. Everybody was healthy. But since then, they've been plagued by injuries, some defections and so forth. It just hasn't been anywhere. They have not been able to field a defense that has been anything like that Super Bowl defense. And that's going to be the ticket. They went out and they drafted A.J. Terrell in the first round. They have to make sure some of these young defensive backs show that they're ready to take over and be competent starters. They have to make sure guys stay healthy as well. And they got to get some pass rush too, because Dante Fowler's there. That's a guy that must, I'd say, if they're going to be effective defensively, maybe 13 or 15 sacks.
Yeah, he's the key.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Carolina.
For sure.
Go ahead.
Let me say this real quick before you hop there. Dan Quinn, as we all know, was a defensive coordinator at Seattle, and this defense has gotten away from him. As you mentioned, they did show signs of life in the second half of the season last year. If they can play anywhere close to that, this football team can challenge.
Yeah, and by the way, they did that thanks to Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris did a tremendous job coming over from the offense, actually, and playing DB coach. Now he's the defensive coordinator. So great job by Raheem Morris. Okay, Carolina. Now, Matt Rule's in town, and it's amazing how quickly Carolina went from a team that could win the division if everything went well for them last year to now being a huge long shot. And you look at this team and it's like, okay, there's still talent there. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater's the quarterback, and he didn't lose with the Saints. And I know this isn't the Saints, but that says something that Teddy Bridgewater knows how to play quarterback. And you know he's going to be better than anything Carolina had last year. You still have Christian McCaffrey. You have receivers that are getting better every year, DJ Moore and Samuel. You sign Robbie Anderson, so now your offense, your skill position players are better than they've been in years. The offensive line, no doubt about it, is the biggest issue or question mark on Carolina's offense. If they can do their job and protect Teddy Bridgewater and make sure he plays 16 games, I don't see why Carolina is looked at as this tremendous long shot. This could be a pretty decent team.
Well, the reason they're the long shot, Greg, is because of the quality of the other three teams.
Yes.
That's the reason. Somebody else has to be the de facto cellar dweller in the division, and that ends up falling on Carolina here. Not as bad, I think, as what they project. Before the season began, and their season win total is 5.5 wins, and everybody has them projected to be tanking for Trevor this football season here to land that number one pick.
I don't see that.
I don't think so. I don't believe in that garbage. Okay, but that's what you're going to be reading about. It's like Miami did last year when they opened up 0-6, and that's all we heard about down here in Miami.
Yeah.
Tanking for Tua, tanking for you don't tell that garbage to the players. They don't want to hear that. They're not out there laying down.
But they're not even anywhere near as bad as Miami was when the season began last year. This is talent-wise, it's like night and day. That's why I'm just shocked that Carolina is being looked at as this Miami Dolphin type team.
Well, the only reason is because they are projected to be the last place team in this division.
Yeah.
I don't think they're the worst team in the NFC, and you have to be the worst team to at least qualify for that number one pick. With Cheddar Bridgewater, they bring a quarterback that's been outstanding against the point spread as a starter in this league. He's 28-7 to the spread in his 35 starts. Very, very conservative in his approach, but I think his biggest weapon is Christian McCaffrey, his running back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, he's the only running back in the NFL in his first 3 seasons to catch over 300 passes. That says a lot for what he can do. I mean, he can hit you he can hit you on the ground. He can hit you in the air. He can do a lot of things. He may be the most valuable, versatile running back in the National Football League.
But you know what? I think that fantasy-wise, he should take a step back if they run this offense correctly, because he can do all of that. But you're going to win less games when Christian McCaffrey is being asked to do too much. And I think he could be more dangerous when you are splitting the touches around. And that's why with Robbie Anderson there now, all of a sudden you got a guy that, if you're paying attention to Christian McCaffrey in the backfield and a couple of receivers running, 5 or 10 yard patterns, and Robbie Anderson decides I'm going deep, you can get beat. And I think that's how you're going to be able to scare the opposition more than just, okay, here, Christian McCaffrey, we're going to let you touch the ball 40 times every week.
Well, the one thing about Teddy Bridgewater and his last name, Bridgewater, there is no deep.
No, unfortunately, yes.
No, he's a dink and dunk quarterback. Okay, and that's where McCaffrey likely serve him best if, if the other defenses don't clam up on him because of that. So what adjustments can Matt Rule make? It'll remain to be seen, but I think it was a great hire nonetheless.
Yeah, and the defense, to me, that's going to be where Carolina is. If they don't have a good season, it's going to be because of the defense. But they drafted Derek Brown and Jeremy Chin. Matter of fact, all of their draft picks went on defense. So they did a really good job stockpiling the defense. Brian Burns is in his second year, so they need him to take that next step. And yes, they are going to lose and miss Luke Kuechly. There's no doubt about it. But I just think that even though that's the biggest question is on defense, at least they paid all of their attention in the draft to defense. So there's a lot of good young talented players to keep an eye on. And if anything, with the young rookie coach and a new quarterback and all these new players, this could be just like we kind of talked about with Cleveland, this could be a very dangerous team late, or actually, just like we're talking about with Cincinnati, this could be a very dangerous team the last month of the season as they start to kind of figure things out as one team and one group. Might take them a while, but I think this is going to be a tough team to play in December.
I'm going to go so far as to say this, that they would be the Cincinnati Bengals of the NFC if Trevor Lawrence were their quarterback, like Joe Burrow is the quarterback for Cincinnati. You'd have a lot of the same elements in place this particular season here. But you did lose a lot when you lost Luke Kuechly here. With him and all what they lost 40 sacks last year. They got to find 40 sacks somewhere.
Sure.
Okay. So this defense is going to be key to this football team this year.
Absolutely.
Right.
And look, Matt Rule, wherever he goes, those teams find a way to play great defense. And that's going to be his job here. Phil Snow has been around a long time. He's been with Rule through thick and thin. Brady was the big hot shot at LSU, and Joe Burrow and all of that. So we'll see what he can do without the talent edge at LSU in college. And Joe Burrow, how does he do as the big man in the NFL with a completely different type of quarterback? So
you're talking Brady?
Yes, Brady, correct.
Yeah, yep. As an offensive coordinator. Yeah, yep. It remains to be seen. Now, if he had a quarterback, that was a prototypical NFL quarterback that could get the ball down the field with a strong arm, it would be another situation or a case. But I think Brady is going to be the one that's going to suffer more so than will Bridgewater in that sense, because Bridgewater he's only limited. He's got capabilities. He only got so much ability. So whether or not Brady asks him to extend and do things that are out of the realm of what he does best remains to be seen.
Okay, just to remind everybody, here's the Playbook magazine once again. Barnes & Noble's Books of Millions, playbook.com. That's the website. Also, go to ourlads.com for the NFL Draft Review Guide, which has been out for about a month now. So check that out as you want to familiarize yourself with all these rookies. Even though, that might even be a situation where Carolina is going to get hurt more than a lot of other teams on defense, because, as I said, everything went on defense in the draft for Carolina, and without a proper offseason for rookies, that could be a real negative for the Panthers the first month of the season, including a rookie head coach. So you might want to think about going against the Panthers the first month of the season.
I agree with that, and I think that's a great point you make about all of the rookies being on the defensive side of the ball with a lack of training camp, a lack of preseason. It can only end up hurting this football team. I'm like we both are. We're big fans of Matt Rule, but you still have to have the talent around you to do that. He's going to build this football program up one block at a time, 1 year at a time. We might not see it this year, but we will see it in 2 or 3 years. I can assure you that.
And we're starting to get better news every week that we talk regarding college. Even though UConn has decided not to play, nobody really cares. When UConn plays, it's like they're not playing anyway. So nobody cares. It has no impact on whether the college football season moves on. I am just hoping that a negative can be turned into a positive, where these Power 5 schools will finally be fed up with the NCAA and say, screw you, we're going on our own. And even though it's going to be a bad thing for the little teams, which we like in college football as fans, if they break away from the NCAA, that means maybe we finally get our real playoff system in the FBS college football. Could be here before we know it. That all depends on whether or not the NCAA wakes up real soon, because they might lose these Power 5 guys.
Yeah, in fact, I do a daily coffee club, Greg, where I send out an email, and I have it in your inbox every morning at 6 o'clock, and I talk about the sports world and what's on hand for that particular day. And my column tomorrow is about the NCAA Power 5 divorce, and it's looming, and I believe it's going to happen, and there's no better time for it to happen than in a pandemic. When obviously the Power 5 conferences can benefit the most. And I'm going to go so far as to almost say this too. It wouldn't surprise me that by the time the season ends, we'll be watching only Power 5 conference football teams playing this year. UConn was the first to bow out as an FBS team. You're going to find other smaller Group of 5 conferences doing the same because their schedules are going to be 5, 6, or 7 games. And they lose all their big money to the Power 5 schools that had to cancel the games. The programs can't afford to put a football team in a program in place when there's no fans in the stands or no attendance like that. So you watch and see I think the group of 5 teams might end up watching these Power 5 teams play football this
Yeah,
year.
the MAC might be the ones that get screwed the most. Sun Belt just announced that their games, so that's a good sign. But I think if there's a conference that could be impacted or was impacted the most, has to be the MAC.
Oh, it does. The only thing that works in their favor is the proximity, the closeness of those schools, and that kind of helps from a bit of a quasi bubble social distancing type of a scenario, that not much travel for them in that sense, which also leads me to my strong belief that the National Football League this year, I believe, will be moving to a bubble. I don't believe that they can even think about traveling across the country and playing games in different stadiums and different hotels. Witness the Major League Baseball right now and the abomination that's been. It's only going to get worse. And look at the success the NBA and the National Hockey League are having right now because they're bubbled and they're under control. And if the National Football League puts all of their games at Levi Stadium in San Francisco and at the new SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles and plays games Thursday through Monday, double and triple headers, they can make the season work in a bubble.
They better have that plan already set.
Yes,
because
they
if
better,
they
right.
don't have that plan set now, then they'll never be able to.
late.
Yeah, it's too late. So, but you never know. That
Right.
could be Plan E
Right.
in their COVID guide of how they're going to get through this season. They just haven't gotten there yet, but maybe they will get there.
Well, like I say, I think the proof is in the pudding. With what's working are the bubble sports, and the sports that aren't working are the non-bubble sports. And I think the National Football League will only become aware, or have to be obvious to become aware of that.
Mark, appreciate it. Next week, it's the AFC South. So it's Bill O'Brien and the Houston Texans going up against the Colts and Phillip Rivers. And, of course, Tennessee, Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. So that'll be a good battle between those 3 teams, with Jacksonville picking up the rear. I can't believe Doug Marrone is still the head coach of that football team.
Yeah, I think this will be his last year as well. We'll talk about that, but it's ironic that we just talked about what I think is the strongest division in the National Football League, the NFC South. And next week we're going to talk about the AFC South, which might be the most mediocre division in the National Football League. But we'll hit on that next week.
Take care, Mark. We'll talk AFC South football a week from today.
Hey, my pleasure, Greg. As always, be well, stay safe. I'll catch you next week.